Hi, today I'm going to show you how to create a Lightning component using object types. My name is David Zamora and I'll be your instructor. So here's a quick forward, if you will. This is an extension to my previous lesson that I call the Lightning Framework Basic Types. And essentially what we did there is, in this lesson, we talked about the basic Aura attribute types, booleans, arrays, integers, strings, decimals, stuff like that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to build on the Aura attribute tag, and we're going to be looking specifically at the object tag. So this lesson can be found on my blog site, My Daily Pour. You can go there and look for it and follow that before you get to this one. And I think that it'll help you as we build our knowledge of Lightning. So here are some quick takeaways right off the bat. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using data tables, and we're going to be using Lightning tabs, which are really cool. And we'll use the Aura attribute, like I mentioned, the object tag. We're going to create an init handler, and this is something new. And the init handler's basic job in the attribute tag there is to call the client-side controller function. And we're going to see that over and over again. And I don't think you can escape this, this particular handler as you go forward and you start developing Lightning components. We're also going to look at a Lightning card. We're going to create a component that's going to create a Lightning card view for us. And we're going to look at the Lightning icons. This has kind of been a really hot topic in Lightning components because people want to understand how they work. And some people oftentimes get confused with how should they style it. Should they use the SLDS or should they just use the Lightning icon tag? And I'm going to show you how to use the Lightning icon tab and probably learn how to spell because I don't know how to spell Lightning. Okay, cool. Let's go through. We're going to look at another object we're going to create, a control component, which is called the record paginator, and its sole responsibility is to basically display one account at a time on the page with two buttons on the bottom. One's for a next and one's for a previous. And what's interesting about this component is that it's going to use something called events, and this is the first time we're going to introduce events. Now, honestly, I think events sometimes are a little tricky, but the better and more familiar you get with events, then you'll be able to introduce those into your Lightning components. And one other thing, I guess I put that in red, that there's no apex involved in this. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to take a string, and I'll show that to you. And essentially, it's an array of account objects, and there's going to be 10 objects in that. So instead of having to get everybody bogged down and create an apex controllers and stuff like that, I'm just going to give you the string, and you can actually modify it if you want to. But I'm going to show you how to use that as an object type to bring in your data. And then once we bring in our data through that object type, then we're going to create the different components that we're going to do. All right. So let's recap. We talked about booleans, date, decimals, integers, strings, and we learned that we can, they're really powerful. You can't escape these. They're going to be popping up over and over again. So you might as well get used to them. And we're basically going to build off of this. Okay. Now, essentially, from my previous lesson, we talked about the Aura component, which just has a open and close tag. And we talked about a few things, the Aura attributes, the booleans and integer arrays. And we talked about a single value Aura attribute. In this case, it's a boolean. And notice it doesn't have a default value, but inherently the default value for a boolean without being specified is false. So if I wanted to make this value true, I'd have to say default equals true. Okay? All right, next we talked about the a conditional statement, the Aura if. So you would say Aura if is true for the value that the variable format knives. I want you to do something. In this case, there's also an else tag here using the Aura set. So, all right, great. And in between those if and else statements here on the screen, if you will, we've got the Aura iteration tag, and it's very powerful. And you probably will see this over and over again, so get used to it. And it essentially iterates through this array, and what it's doing here is it's painting the value to the screen. That's all. Very simple. So there are some tags that you've seen before. Now we're going to start introducing you to some new ones. So a few of the new ones, you're going to see an Aura event tag. And of course, the Aura attribute tag is going to pop up. our Aura application, and Aura component. Those are inherent because we're going to use those to create our application and component. But there's one thing that's not on the screen and that we've seen was it's going to be our Aura handler. And that's a new thing as well. But we'll see that as we go along. So again, real quick to recap, what is an Aura attribute? Well, it's a way to provide, it provides a way to save values that change and a way to name those value placeholders. And here's an example. So we've got this Aura attribute tag, and the name of it is called stages. And the type of value in that attribute is a custom object called stage, and it's an array. And then following that's just a simple description. So this is like, again, it's just a quick recap. Now, the thing we're going to be talking about today is the object, and it's just an attribute can have a type corresponding to an object. In this case, our corresponding type is going to be an object of type account, and I'll show you that in a minute. Okay. So, okay, let's jump in and let's start doing this. We're in the developer console. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an app, a Lightning app, to house all our components here. So I'll go to the File, New, Lightning app, and I've got something already there. I'll remove the space. Okay, and click on Submit. Great. So there's our placeholder. What I'm going to do is, because I can, I've got all my source code over on the left screen here that you can't see. I'm just going to replace the source code here with mine, and then let's talk about it. One thing at the very top, you'll notice that I've used extends equals force SLDS. And so what we're doing is we're telling the application, hey, we want you to use the SLDS style sheet to style everything. And you'll notice that we've got the classes that are appropriate for that style sheet. In this style sheet, well, actually, let me back up. In this application, I typically put a template that I have, and I use this over and over again. It's a basic template, and you can have your own or use this if you will. But what's interesting is down here at the bottom where it says Add Component here. What we're going to do is create a component that's going to be housed within this application so that we actually see it. So let's leave it there. We'll come back to this in just a minute. Okay. Next, we're going to create our first component. So I'll go to File, New, Lightning Component. I'll replace this. And this is going to be called our Account Demo Viewer, if you will. And I'll select these tabs here and click on Submit. Awesome, here you go. So incidentally, the checkboxes that are selected on the screen are responsible for the various elements up here. Okay. Next, we're going to replace the code in the window with my code. And when I look at code, immediately my eyes are drawn to the Aura attributes at the very top. And I kind of look at these and go, okay, well, we've got an object array of accounts, and it's type object. And I've got another thing called ACCT, which it's just a single account. And it's a type object, but it's not an array. Okay, so it's a single account. And then I look at the Aura handler, which is a new thing. And essentially this tag is responsible for firing off this function, and it's an action function within the controller. And this is a new thing that I'm going to show you in a minute how to create the controller. But just know that this thing here fires off when the page is first rendering. And what it does is it says, hey, look, there's a handler, do something. It says, okay, the action is go fire off this function within the controller. Okay, great. And then now we have, below that, we've got the Lightning tabs. And if you want to learn more about Lightning, the Lightning tab set, go to the Lightning developer documentation. It'll show you how to use it. But you're looking at it on the screen, and it's pretty simple. So there's 3 tabs that we have here. One's going to be our table view. One is going to be a card view, and the next one and the last one is going to be a record paging view, and we're going to see all 3. Okay? So here we go. What next we're going to do is go back over to the application. And down at the bottom where it said add component here, I'm going to replace it with the component that we just created, call the account demo viewer. So that's how it's going to be housed in there. Go to file, save. Right. Now I'm not going to run the application at this point, because if I do, the Aura handler is going to fire and it's going to go look for this function that doesn't exist in our controller. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this doInit function into our controller. So I'll click on the controller on the right hand side, and I'm going to replace what's in the window with my code. And it's kind of really sloppy, but what I've got here are an array of accounts that are coming straight out of the of my developer org. And you might look at these accounts and say, hey, they look pretty familiar. Yeah, they're pretty standard. So let's see. I've got 10 elements in this array. And the cool thing about this, like I mentioned earlier, is we don't have to go and create an Apex controller on the server side. What we can do is we can manipulate this data string here to show values on the screen. So if, for example, if I wanted the account name to be Genie Point with a little p, okay, cool, great, I can do that. I don't have to go back into Salesforce and change the value. And in this case, I didn't bring back every field. I just brought back 6 or 7. So that is the variable G. And so what we're going to do is we're going to assign G to our array of account objects. Very simple. And we're using the component.set. You'll see that a lot, and you'll be using it a lot, okay? Component.sets and component.gets. And we'll see those as we go along. But the next line, we're basically taking the first element of our array, first account, and assigning it to this single variable here called account. So that only contains one account, as opposed to an array of all the accounts. Okay? Up, file, save all. Great. And next what we're going to do is we're going to click on the account demo viewer CMP file. And we're going to implement some code right here. All right, so essentially this code is responsible, and you notice right off the bat, it is a table. And so this is going to be a table view. We're going to have several columns in your account name, revenue, billing state, type, industry. And then again, we can't, like I said earlier, we can't escape the Aura iteration. It's very powerful, and there's so many uses for it that again here, what we're going to do is we're going to iterate through this this array of accounts and then bring those to the user onto the screen. In this case, I've actually done a little math here. I'm going to divide my annual revenue by this number, and then it shows on the screen as million. But so here we have it. This is the first tab, and then once we're done with that, we'll come back and do the card view component, and we'll do the record paging component. So what I'll do is go up, file, save all, click on the app demo app on the left hand side, and click on preview. And if everything works out well, here we go. Great. Now you see the tabs at the very top. The first tab, again, is this table view of the 10 accounts. And again, you can see the revenue in millions of dollars here. The card view, we have not added that to our component, nor the page viewer here. So, okay, great. We're done. We're done with the first set of components here. So what did we learn out of this? So a couple of things that we did learn. We learned how to actually put a tab on the page. And before the Lightning tab tag, people were using JavaScript or jQuery to control the action of the selection at the very top. But now the Lightning tab tag, if you will, is a lot easier. You don't even have to deal with that. You just put that in your component, and off you go. It's pretty easy. All right, so we learned a little bit about the Aura object type, and if I go back to it and look at my Aura object type, it's essentially a string, and it's this really cool technique. If you want to get up and running, start learning how to use components without having to go and learn Apex, you can use this technique and you can bring data in. You can actually modify this, and you'll notice that there's a name and then a colon and then the name of the account or ID and the ID. You might want to bring in some other values into the string as well. So you can build on this string and bring values and format the values on your screen. Very cool, very powerful. And then the last thing we learned is and I'll see if I can find it. It's at the very top. The Aura handler. And that's cool. I like it. But I'm going to show you something kind of neat. It's that I mentioned earlier that this fires when the page is rendering. What I'm going to do is paste a button right here. And the button's going to do the same thing. But it's going to fire when I actually click on it. And it's going to do the same thing as fire off the doInit function, action function within our controller. And I'll click on the controller button here. It's going to fire off this guy right here. It's going to set my array here and then grab the first element of the array and set it as the single account. So back to this guy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a file save all and click on the demo app tab. Click on preview and it renders, and notice that nothing renders on the screen. The Aura handler has been removed, but now I have this button. I'll click on it and there you have it. There's your data. So this is a technique that you can use as well, as where you click a button, it does an on click, if you will, and then fires off the function. Okay? Next, we're going to create the card viewer component. To do that, I'm going to File, New, Lightning Component. I'll replace what's there already with my account demo viewer controller, and I'll select these guys and click on Submit. Okay, great. Now I've got some source code over in this left window here that you can't see. I'm going to copy that out and replace the content of this window with my source code. All right, so this is the card viewer. And what it's doing here in the first line, again, remember my eyes quickly go to the first couple of lines and look at the Aura attributes or handlers or whatever events that might be there. And in this case, I went straight to the attribute and I noticed that there is an attribute and the name is called object array of accounts. And it's an object array. And you're like, wait a second. Didn't we already use that? Well, yes, we did. We used it in the previous controller. And so now what I'm doing is I'm including that in this controller. Actually, let me rephrase that. I'm taking that value, I'm going to pass it into this component. That's better said. And I'm going to do the same thing for that single account that I created back on the account demo viewer. And I'm going to pass in just one account as well. Make sense? And the sole responsibility for this component is to receive the array of accounts and display them on the screen. That's it. So then again, you'll notice down below here, I've got my Aura iteration tag, and we're going to iterate through this array of accounts and basically format them and put them on the screen for you. That's it. So really, it's really simple. Now I'm going to go to File, Save. And we're missing something, an article. So let's put that down here at the very bottom. I probably didn't copy that out. All right, let's see if it's happy. Great. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and click on the account demo viewer CMP. We're going to scroll down to the bottom in the Lightning tab, and now we're going to add our second component right here. And what this is doing is it's referencing this component we just created, the card viewer. And if you'll notice, the card viewer is looking for an attribute within it and passing on this variable object array of accounts into it. So we're passing it into the component. Okay. All right. So that's great. So now let's go ahead and do a save all. Click on the account demo app, tap, and preview the results. Okay. I'll click on my view. Okay. Here's my table view, which we just saw a minute ago. And now I'm going to click on my card view, and guess what? Hey, got a different view. And what I'm going to do is kind of, let's see, shrink the screen a little bit. And notice that the cards are going to start to collapse by column. So now I've got 2 columns. I start to collapse it even further. And now I've got 1 column. So call it responsive. Yeah, sort of. But I control how many columns are shown when it's displayed at its maximum. And I also control how many columns are shown when it's considered medium size. And I can control it when it's considered small. All right? And that's all within the styling of the component. I'll show you that in a second. Okay, great. All right, we're done with that. Next, let's go back to the code. And one thing I do want to show you is the use of the Lightning icon. And this is a really hot topic, as I mentioned earlier, because it's very versatile and it's easy to use. And what I'm going to do here is, if you want to learn more about it, go to the lightningdesign.com, which is basically houses the documentation for the SLDS, and look for icons. And within it, you're going to have, once you find the page, you're going to have a page that says, okay, here are the basic icons. And then there's variants of the basics. And there's some called utility. There's some called action. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you, I'm going to copy this out. And we're going to change up our icon to an action clone. So the variant name is called action and the name of the icon is called clone. Let's see if I have that up and I can show you guys this. This is pretty cool. Okay, let's take a look at this real quick. So I am at the lightningdesignsystem.com page, and on the right hand side you get to see these categories of icons. Some are actions, some are customs, doc type, standard, and utility, and then the name of the icon. So what we're looking at here are action icons and the name. So what we're going to do is we're going to use action and clone in our code, okay? That I could have done, let's scroll down. I could have done, which we currently have, I believe. We have standard and account right now. Standard and account. That's the name of the icon. So let's go back to our source code, and I'll do an undo real quick. And notice that I have standard, the name, and the name of the icon. So what I want to do is I'm going to replace this with action clone and replace this. I'll put a dash in here as well. So we've got an SLDS icon, action dash clone, and down here the icon name is the name of the variant, which is action, and the name of the icon, which is clone. So cool. Go to File, Save All, click on my app demo, click on my update preview, and it's off the page right now. But let's see. Now the icons have changed. Well, those basically look like the same ones, and we're using an action clone. So action and clone. There you go. There's the icon we're using. So again, use this as a reference, and I would suggest that you experiment with your icons now that we have this card viewer. Okay. All right, great. Now here comes the fun part. This is going to be, what we're looking at the screen is we have a table view, which we're looking at a component that's housing these tabs and this table. Within that component, we have another component here that is essentially taken in, it's being passed in the array of accounts into it, and then it's just formatting and showing it to us. Okay, cool. And the next thing we're going to do is the record paging view. And essentially what this does is it's going to have, and you're very familiar with this, and it's a record that has a previous and next button at the bottom. So if you click on next, it takes you to the next record. If you click on the previous button, it brings you to the previous one, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is do this. And this is a really interesting component because it has three different types of components that compose it. First is, and I'll show you this, it's a component that we're going to add to it that is going to have buttons down at the bottom, right? You'll see those in a minute. And then those are the ones that control the forward and backward paging. And then there's going to be another component that we're going to create, and it's called a lightning event. And I'll show you how to do that as well. So let's get started. We're almost there. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a component. And this will get you every time. If there's a space up here, you'll get an error. So make sure you don't have any spaces. I'll click on Lightning tab. All right, click on Submit. All right, here's our component. And I'm going to copy and paste some values into it. Okay. Now this is starting to look familiar, but again, my eyes are immediately drawn to the top, and I'm looking at the Aura attributes. Now we're going to see a couple of new ones introduced here. Well, they're not new, but to the page and to the component they are. So what we're going to do is we have an Aura attribute, which is an integer called page, pages, page size, total. And these variables basically control the pages. And so I only have 10 accounts. I really have a total of 10. And so it's kind of hard-coded, if you will. And the number of pages is 10. The page keeps track of where we're at. So I'll explain that in a minute. As when you start to click on the forward and the records change on the page, this guy here keeps track of which page number you're on, and I'll show you that. Again, to our friend, the object array of accounts, we're passing that in, and the single account. And again, our friend, the Aura handler, that's going to do, this is an action to the doInit function in our controller. So when I immediately see something like that, I go, aha, there's a controller somewhere, so I got to go look at it. And then there's another of Aura handler, and this is actually going to be an event. So what this is going to do, and it's responsible for keeping track of which button you push, whether it's the forward button or the back button. And then depending on which one you do, it's still going to fire off a function called page change within our controller. And we're going to add that controller here in a second. And then what you see below is basically the style. And we're taking these values from the array and displaying them onto the screen. The last line is actually another component. So, golly geez, are you guys keeping track of this? We have a component, and then another component, and embedded with that component is another component. Okay? And that happens to be this thing called the account demo paginator page selector, which are the buttons down at the very bottom of the controller. And I'll show you that as well. So, okay, cool. This is the code. It's a lot. Now we're going to implement the controller by clicking on the controller button on the right-hand side. I'll remove everything out of the window and paste it with my code. So here again is the doInit function and the page change function that's going to fire using the event right here. And it basically keeps track of the direction you're going, either it's forward or backward. Well, that's actually it's previous and next, but you get it. Okay, cool. As you look at the source code here, your eyes are going to be drawn immediately to this guy here. helper. And you're like, what? Helper what? What is this? I haven't seen this before. It just popped up. Well, a helper is basically another set of code that I'm going to use to pass on the component that we're working on. And if you'll notice that I've got the helper, and it's called gets object records up here, and I'm only passing in a component, but down here at the bottom I'm using the same one, and I'm passing in the component and a page number. So what I want that function here to do is act on that page number. So let's go ahead and add our helper. Okay, click on the helper button, and I'll remove code in the window, and here's our function. So basically, like I said earlier, it either can be a component, which we're calling it in the doInit, and then it could also take in a page value. And this basically says, hey, depending on which page you're on, I'm going to call the array of objects, and I'm going to grab the array element depending on the page number. Oh, and -1. Because my pages start with 1 and my array starts with 0, so I've got to do the math and subtract 1 from that. And this guy here is responsible for telling me back at the component what page I'm on. Very simple. Actually, it's harder. It looks simple, but it's harder to troubleshoot. All right, so now what we want to do is we're going to create another component, and that's going to be the page selector. I'll do a quick save all. And what we're going to do is create a new component. Called page selector. I'll click on submit. I notice I'm not actually selecting some of these checkboxes here. Click on submit, and I'm going to copy out my source code, place it in here. Okay. Immediately, again, my eyes are drawn up to the top of the page, and I'm looking for these Zora attributes. I say, okay, there's a integer called page, page number, and total. So this is going to be the variable that keeps track of what page we're on. This is actually the number of pages, which we already hard-coded to be 10, and the total is 10. And you'll see that down here and here. On the screen, you might not be able to notice this real quick, but here's a button, and then within that button's a label, and then there is another button. And if you look at it closely, one's the previous button, and one's the next button, and some stuff in between. Cool. Now let's create the controller for this component. Come over to controller, replace the code with mine, and now we've got these two functions here. Previous page and next page, and they're firing. Let's see, let's go back. And they're firing down here. Okay? So we've got our functions page forward, page next, and it's calling an event. And that controller called the count page paginator page change. All right, we haven't gotten to that yet. So we're going to have to create this event. So here's something new, and you'll notice that it's setting a parameter in the event. And this is a string value. It says, hey, look, hey, parameter direction is going to be set to previous, or if page next, it says the direction is going to be next, and then it fires my event. Okay. Now, I gotta stress this because events are a little tricky. They're harder than most things to implement because sometimes it gets a little tricky when these events fire. You can't see them. But once you get used to creating events, you'll become a wizard at them. But fundamentally, this is how we're going to do it in this component. So, all right, great. So now what we're going to do is go to File, New, And this is a new thing. We've been going to Lightning application and component. We haven't created an interface. That'll come in a later video. But this is a Lightning event. So I'm going to click on Lightning event and let's name it. This is my account demo paginator change event, and I'll click on submit, and it's very simple. There's not much in this. And let's see, grab some source code, replace this with my code, and you look at it. So the event fires, and it has a value in here called direction, or the name of this or attribute is direction, and it's a string. And earlier we saw that we're going to fire off the event and set the parameter. Let's see if we can get back to that source code. We're going to set the parameter to this value to either next or previous. As you click on the button, it's going to call the event. The event says, hey, you just went forward or next, or you went previous, or you went back. This is the whole idea behind the event. Okay, so sweet, we're done. I think it's time to do a save all. And okay, now I think it's time to go back to the account demo viewer. I'll scroll to the right. And what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to the bottom of the page. Right, I got the wrong one. Account demo viewer. Scroll to the bottom of the page where it says add record paging component here. We're going to paste in our account demo paginator viewer that we created. And again, what we're doing is we're taking the Aura attribute that we created inside that component, and we're passing in this object array of accounts. Now let's go to the app demo. I'll click on that, and if everything was correct, we should see, click on my view button. We should see a view card, which is great, and then this new component called record paging. So here we are. So this is the first account. Now when I click on this button, it's going to fire off the event. The event is going to look at the page number that I'm at, and you'll see the numbers start changing. So now it knows that I'm on record 2 of 10, so on and so forth. When I get to the end, it becomes disabled, and that was in the source code. And the only way I can do is go back. And this basically is showing you one account at a time. So anyway, okay, well that's it. We've covered a lot, and I think that once you start getting into this paging, that you're going to find some really cool stuff within it, because it's a little bit more complex. It's I would call it a compound component, if you will, because it's sharing the components. The card view is cool. Like I said, play with the icons, play with the styling within the style sheet, make it your own. If you want to, for example, on this screen, you want to see, well, let's see, the card viewer. Here we go. So within the style sheet in this class, I have the SLDS large dash size dash 1 of 3. So let's see if I wanted to change it to 4. When the screen is large, then I should see 4 columns. Let's do that then. One, two, three, 4. There you have it. And if this is what you're looking for as far as the user interface, you want 4 columns, or four columns of cards, you can do that. So notice that my view button at the very top, it's getting a little irritating because I don't want to have to push that button every time. I was just using it as an example. What I'm going to do is go ahead and replace it with my my init handler that I had before, and let this thing load up on load. So let's close that out, and we'll go to here, scroll up to the very top. I'm going to take my lightning button out. Now, one other thing, I suggest you go to the lightning developer documentation, look at lightning button. There's all kinds of variants that you can do with the button and change it up, and play with that for a while. Experiment lightning buttons as well. Okay, so let's replace this with my Aura handler. I'll do a file save all. We'll click on my account demo app tab at the very top. Click on preview, and there you go. Loads up on render. Okay, that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a lot of stuff that we covered, and we're just this is just the tip of the iceberg. But I think that our starting point was the Aura attribute. We're building on that Aura attribute and slowly introducing other things that that can help you as you start to learn more and more about Lightning components. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than this, but I think this is the starting point, and it's best to start at the beginning than to jump into something very complex, and then just lose sight and interest of with Lightning components. And one cool thing that, like I said, we introduced the object type for the Aura attribute, and we have this string that has an array of accounts in it. So it could be anything you want to. You can modify it and change it and just say it's contacts, or cases, or whatever you want. You take that string and you can modify the 10 records that are within that string and make it your own. And then you have the opportunity to go ahead and style your user interface with the style sheet and experiment with that. Get really good at how to do certain things with the style sheet. For example, this table, you can style it many different ways, but you don't have to run back to the server to an Apex call to get your data. So what we'll end up doing eventually is getting to the point where we're going to create our own Apex controllers and then bring that data in, basically based off of a call. So we're not there yet. We'll start small and slowly add to our toolkit, if you will. So, okay, thank you very much, folks. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.